Hey T&Ts, I hope you are all well and that you enjoyed the nice blustery night we had the other night. That was a pretty interesting wind, eh? Um, who likes writing letters? That's kind of the thing that we're going to need to talk about tonight. Um, maybe there's a letter that you've gotten from somebody that was really special or something like that, where maybe your grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or a cousin wrote you a letter. Maybe you've got a pen pal, something like that. Those are always really special letters, aren't they? Maybe an activity that you could do after you're done your Awana stuff tonight is maybe you could write your Awana leader a nice encouragement note and tell them about the different things God's been teaching you lately and send it to them in the mail. Maybe you should ask for their address and maybe you could do that. And I'm sure they would love to have that letter from you. But we don't really send a whole bunch of letters anymore today, do we? Quite often we'll use email or Facebook or text messages. Especially like when you get into your teen years and stuff like that, it seems like those are the more popular things to do. It's more our grandparents or our parents who are far more into sending letters, right? Well, in the first century, they didn't have internet or computers or cell phones or even landlines. That's a long time ago that they didn't have landlines. And this is way before that, right? And the way that they talked to each other over long distances was through letters. And so when we when we come to the New Testament, what we see in a lot of cases are letters that people wrote to one another. Okay, and this was a pretty expensive thing to do. Okay, you had to pay for the paper, which had to be made by hand. You had to make the ink by hand, which wasn't too expensive, but could be if you really wanted to be extravagant. But probably the most expensive thing was that you had to actually get somebody to take the letter to the particular place you wanted it to go. So you either had to know somebody who was going there already, or even pay somebody to go and take that specifically for you to a certain place. And so even though it was the main mode of communication over long distances, it was still really expensive. It's interesting, though, that we have all of these different letters because the author of these letters, or the authors of these letters, really had important things to say. Last week, Pastor Tim told you about the book of Acts, right? And this is where the apostles of Jesus go and spread his message of salvation as they were commanded to in a whole bunch of different places in the known world at that time. After Acts in our Bibles, we've got 21 letters that basically we get to read other people's mail here. Letters that were sent to different churches or different people, or people who had heard about Jesus in certain areas like Galatia. And these letters were written by Paul and Peter and John and James and Jude and whoever wrote Hebrews to these different churches and people so that they could teach and hear more about the good news. And so, yeah, we get to have the privilege of reading other people's mail. But it's really cool because, it spoke to those people in those circumstances in that day. But also, we can learn a lot from reading those letters ourselves. Each of these letters are written to a particular church or a particular person or group of people in an area where the message of Jesus is already spread. And, the apostles were writing to people that they knew in a lot of cases, but also some churches that had started up, like Colossae, in a place where they hadn't been, yet other people had shared the good news there. Each of these letters was also written for a specific purpose. Okay? Each letter contains something about what the author wants that church or that person to know. okay, about God's salvation plan that he carried out through Jesus Christ and how we ought to live in response to what God has done. And so in several letters, there's a particular issue that the author wants to talk about. Like in Corinth, there were a bunch of people that were, misunderstanding that, just because they had salvation in Jesus didn't mean give them license to do whatever they wanted. They could sin and all these different types of things and say that, I'm forgiven anyway, so I can do all these different things. No, that's not the case. We need to follow Jesus and be obedient to him, right? It's kind of like when we have a friend who's acting foolishly, okay? And we want to, have a conversation with them about this because, we care about them. We don't want them to act foolishly. We want them to do well, and we want them to follow Jesus and be obedient to him, right? Well, Paul wrote several letters to these different churches where people were listening to people say things about Jesus that weren't true, and they were starting to believe them and do the things that they weren't supposed to do. Okay, there were also ones who, like in Corinth, like I just said, that were living in sin and doing different things that they knew they shouldn't have, but they needed correction anyways. We see the same thing in Galatians, that there's people that are saying that there's certain things that the Gentiles have to do in order to be Christians, when that wasn't the case for the gospel message. We also see that each letter tells the reader how they're supposed to apply the message that the writer is giving to their own lives as well. Okay? And so, we've got a whole bunch of different applicational things, okay? Things that help them apply that message to their own lives so that they can follow Jesus better. Okay? Your Awana verse for the week really sums this up well. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 15 says this, "So then, brothers, stand firm and hold to the traditions you were taught by us, either by spoken word or by our letter." Right? So the apostles were teaching these things. They were the same message that Jesus taught, and they're explaining it in ways that people can understand and help them to follow him better. So the really cool thing is, even though these letters were written to people 2,000 years ago, and they were dealing with these different circumstances that that they were facing that day, we get to read their mail. And the truth of the matter is, some of the same circumstances that they were facing, we face in a similar but different way today. And so these letters are really helpful as we deal with people who are trying to tell us false things about Jesus. These letters tell us who Jesus is in a very clear and concise way, so that we can, stand firmly on the truth of who Jesus is. We also see that, sometimes we can fool ourselves into thinking that, we have, we can do things that we know God doesn't want us to do. And we can, lie to ourselves and convince ourselves of those things. But these letters hold us to account. They help us to understand, no, that is not right thinking. That is not how to live in a manner that is worthy of the gospel that has saved me. And so they call us to account and help us to live our lives in ways that are honoring to the Lord. Now, let me give you a few things here to help you read these letters better, right? It's always important to understand, okay, here is this group of different books of the Bible that we're reading, and how can I, take time and put the best into that time so that I can understand what's going on and how to read these better. Okay, so first of all, I would encourage you to take time to read the whole letter. Okay, now some of the letters are really long. Okay, like Romans, that's a long book. Okay, 16 chapters. Maybe you want to split that up a little bit. But, listen to the whole thing, okay? Read the whole thing. And take time to wrestle with that, and think about the different things that Paul is teaching in Romans. Other letters, though, are really short. Like Colossians is really short. It's only 4 chapters. By the time if you started at breakfast and you eat your food and read it at the same time, you'll probably be pretty close to done by the time you're done your bowl of cereal or whatever, okay? So maybe take time to read it through, all in one sitting, okay? Maybe if you're like me and you need to hear things as well as read things, or just hear it alone if you got something else that you need to do, but you want to listen to God's Word at the same time, there's a website called Bible Gateway, and you can actually listen to the Bible, any book you want, for free. And so take time to look that up. And if that helps you, man, that helps me. So that's a good website to use. But reading a letter again and again will help you to understand not only what the letter is about, but also it'll cause you to think about the different things that you need to wrestle with in terms of what the Lord is asking you to do, in terms of applying it to your life. How does this matter to me? Those types of things. Second big thing that you can do is note that the author's main point for his letter is usually in his prayer at the start of the letter. Okay? There's only 2 New Testament letters that do not have a prayer at the very start. Hebrews and 1 John. Okay? But these 2 letters hammer home the main point time and time again. Hebrews is very much that Jesus is the better Savior, better high priest, better prophet, all these different types of things. And that's the main point that he wants to drive home. First John is all about, the different tests of faith and stuff like that. And the fact that our faith is not a myth, but rather that the apostles saw and heard and looked upon Jesus. They handled him with their hands. It's not something that they just made up. Okay? And so there's the different tests of faith. Here's the different things that I need to wrestle with to ask if my faith is real. Okay? But here's an example. Okay? If you look at Colossians, here is an example of the prayer where we find the main point in the letter, in the prayer here. We find the main point for the whole letter in the prayer. So Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 and 10 are, and then kind of going down to the end of 14 gives you a little bit more, but 9 and 10 are really helpful, okay? It says here, "And so, from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will and all the spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God." Okay? Paul wants the church in Colossae essentially to stop listening to these false teachers who are trying to say that they need Jesus plus other things to be able to have salvation. But Paul wants them to understand that, that they are already full in the knowledge, and that if they believe in Jesus, they have everything that they need. Okay, and that's essentially, gives us the 2 main drives of the book as well. And this is the third thing. Okay, the author will often teach the readers something, and then he will tell them how to apply it. Okay? And so in Colossians, chapter 1 and chapter 2, Paul teaches us a lot about who Jesus is and this great salvation that he has won us. But in chapter 3 and 4, basically he tells us how to apply it. How can we walk in a way that is honoring to the Lord? Okay? And so, often we'll have, those two main things that the writer is talking about. In a longer book like Romans, okay, Paul kind of alternates. One chapter he'll talk about, this teaching that he wants them to understand. The next chapter, he'll apply it. And then, sometimes we'll have two chapters of application. Excuse me, one chapter of teaching. He mixes it up a little bit more because of a longer book. Okay, but those three things I think will help you and take you a long way. The fourth one is go back and look at the book of Acts as well. What's going on in this church in the book of Acts? That'll often help. And if you got some other stuff that maybe is like quotations from the Old Testament, go back and read those Old Testament quotes, or go back and read that passage in the Gospels that is being quoted there. Those are some very helpful hints to help you read these letters better. So I hope you have a good week. I hope that you take some time to read some of these letters, other people's mail, right? Also, I encourage you to write a short little encouragement note to your Awana leader and send it in the mail. I'm sure they would love to get a letter from you about what's going on in your life and what God is teaching you. Have a great week. We will talk to you later.